Teachable has been around since 2014, and now, 4 years later, we are an 80-person company based out of New York City. Our stack is Ruby, Rails, TypeScript, and React. We have about 22 engineers and 7 people on product. So if you're interested in learning more about Teachable, you can contact our lead recruiter, Jacob, at teachable.com. What is Teachable? We are a platform for anyone who wants to create and sell their own online course. Teachable can be a white label solution, and we are not marketplace for courses, so that's what sets us apart from a lot of similar products. And now, Matthew.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yay!
Today we're going to talk about how to choose a language. Why would anyone want to choose a language? What are the reasons you choose a language? Anybody?
To get a better job.
Okay, yeah, so career.
Career.
Yeah.
development.
To start a new project or break off an existing service into a microservice.
Okay, so you can do that with a lot of different languages, but say shifting considerations or
Right.
different constraints. So let's call that an engineering reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
What else?
I like to pick them on how different they are from what I'm used to.
Okay, so I do that as well, but I would call that generally education, right?
Yeah.
Or enrichment, as it were. And those come from engineers who are actively engaged in their career, which is a good thing. So, let me turn around so I can throw stuff up on the screen. So yeah, first question for anyone as far as choosing a language is, what is your motivation? This is the great actor Nicolas Cage showing off his talent in screaming with barbed wire on his face. And he represents my idea of motivation. You need to have motivation in order to learn a programming language because it's hard, especially if you haven't programmed before. So that's the first consideration I have. If you haven't programmed before and you want to program, what's the best language to choose? Why would you choose it? Why would you choose that language?
I think Ruby is the easy one to learn.
Okay. Yes, it is easy and forgiving to learn. It allows you to succeed even when not doing the prescribed workflow or process, because it is flexible.
It reads more like English.
It is
English is your
syntactically flexible, and
Yeah.
more like English. Most French speakers would cringe at that idea. That was a benefit at all.
Okay. English speaking people, that's a benefit.
Yeah, I love, one of the things for learning is in the REPL release it has a did you mean when you type in an invalid method, which can be very useful when you're learning and you don't know what you made, the mistake you made. Oh, it has a list of mistakes you might have made.
Yes, and I've worked with the author of Did You Mean? He was when he was at Pivotal. I don't know if he's still at Pivotal.
There's also a good community
Yes.
around it, lots of documentation.
Yeah. So those are great considerations. Some people, especially those who took Java and whatnot in school, might think that Ruby might not be a good first language. Why would that be?
Well, studying that languages have if you use an IDE, you get a lot. That's how I got through most of my Java classes. Just let the autocomplete just do its thing.
Awful. That is awful. You are the worst kind of person.
I just need to have a thing, and
I get it.
This work. And this one kind of seems okay. Let's go with that one.
I haven't been able to spell since 1993. the robots do it for me. So
Well, there's something that is, less good in
With Java,
languages like Ruby.
with Java, it's really important to have something that helps you with a lot of syntax and auto generation and things of that nature, because it's such a verbose language. Because you have to do so much typing for any particular function. It's gonna have to. You're gonna want a tool like IntelliJ's IDEA or another IDE with a lot of support there. But I've heard arguments about Ruby not being a good language to learn first for computer science reasons, or to teach for a computer science course. And that's because, as a teacher, it's hard to say with authority that this is the way to do it in Ruby, when there are 12 other ways to do that particular function. So it's also has enough flexibility that you can run the same. If you run the same code in a different Ruby engine, you can have wildly different performance considerations. So that's one of the reasons that I've heard that Ruby is not a great learning language. But I think that really is personal. I think there's that, but there's also different students that don't like that as well, right? To have to learn like a language and then discover that there are 12 different ways to say something is very much like first being introduced to English. You don't, you're coming from a language that has very strict rules in some sense, and you're going to something that has, it gives you the crippling paralysis of options, all right? If you all are in New York or have been for a long time, and don't go outside of the city that much, you experience the crippling paralysis of options when you go into, say, a Walmart or a Sam's Club or something outside of the city, where this is all of Brooklyn. It's amazing. It's just too much, and it can be overwhelming. So there is some consideration from the student side as well. It's not just bad teachers. It can be that, but also JavaScript is also a little hard to teach because any particular project you would choose, any particular technology that would be applied except for like raw vanilla JavaScript, right, will be gone in 6 months, replaced by 12 other things.
And documentation out there may be 6 months out of date, which means it's completely useless.
Yep. Which is why I think that most university programs, I think, for early programming are doing Python early because it has dynamic support, has a lot of what Ruby has going and brings to the table, but it also has a little bit more strict machine issues and memory management, things of that nature.
So one of the things I find with someone who's only done dynamic languages, if I meet someone like that, is they don't always have a good idea of what like the return type is because it's all dynamic.
Sure.
So they'd be more tempted to do like, it returns a number. In this case, it returns a string. In this case, and it returns a boolean. And that they're like,
I put some JavaScript docs in a project recently, and someone I was working with, what's that? Like, how else can you at a glance see what you need as parameters, what they are, and everything that goes with it? It's not. I need to do some of that with testing, but in Python and JavaScript, you have different considerations for that, especially with JavaScript, because you can do a lot more functional programming. And functional programming, I think, has a different taste when it comes to unit and integration tests. You don't have to test the same function 20 times.
20 different inputs.
You can with 20 different inputs, yeah, but you should do that in the base library and not in everything that inherits it or everything that uses it. Right?
Sure.
Okay. So, yeah, education and learning a new language. Those are great bits, and I would say to kind of leapfrog onto last time we talked, one of the great things in that is learning a language just because you don't know, you have a blank spot, right? I learned Haskell not because I thought it was useful or that I would really start any real project with it. I think since I learned it, I've only really had 2 things in production, and they're basically replacements for C libraries that I had. But the point of learning it was I had no functional experience at all, right? I didn't learn Lisp. I didn't learn any of that. And I was like coding JavaScript as if it was Java. And it was just like that entire paradigm of functional programming was gone to me. So I learned what everyone told me was the coolest, newest functional language out there. Which didn't give me a lot as far as practical experience. But what it did is it really kind of opened my eyes to that paradigm, which has helped me program JavaScript as well as Python in that respect as well. So yeah, I would say Python is a great learning language. Ruby is a great learning language. JavaScript is probably going to be the learning language of every boot camp out there in the next 5 years.
Mm-hmm. So far, we got a bunch of people that still do Ruby, right? Like that's.
I mean, yeah, but Flatiron shifted, right? They no longer do Ruby, I don't think.
I don't know.
Yeah, and they also do a lot of Elixir.
Yeah, they are, yeah.
What's that?
I mean, they're doing both. They're doing Ruby and then they do React on top of that.
Okay. Yeah, I know they have one course of that, but I'm not sure if they still do it.
I have a friend who's in that course right now.
Okay, great. Good. Yeah, and I think that's, but I don't see any universities teaching Ruby still.
I've never seen any.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of additional adult education programs and things of that nature, which are effectively run like boot camps inside of universities as well. But so that brings us to, let's see, what did we cover? Career, right?
Not so much. Best jobs prospects yet.
Yeah, okay. And that's what you would say that career means as far as that type of learning?
I mean, that's part of it. For instance, one of the reasons a lot of boot camps are moving away from Ruby is because there has been a glut of junior level Ruby programmers over the last 5 years.
Yeah? Is that true?
I would say so.
Yeah?
I would say there's a glut just because of the boot camps.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the market's oversaturated, but
Yeah.
I don't think it has much to do with the exact language.
An idea of the demand for developers.
So you're saying there's a glut for of junior developers?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, that makes sense.
And also, it's hard to determine how much a person really got out of the program because.
But some of the measurements in job placements, which I think is probably the driver for a lot of people that go into them, right?
Say that again?
So a lot of boot camps have measurements as far as job placement, right?
What kind of measurement?
Like we, out of all of the students we've had, we've
Oh,
placed
yeah.
80% at successful careers or whatever.
They
Those are somewhat massaged numbers, I would assume.
Yeah.
They a lot of them that is how you pay for them. I think. You when you do a boot camp, they take your firstborn and the first 50% of the first 5 years at the.
And they teach your firstborn like Ruby.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. So then
Yeah. Well,
instead of working, they'll be building a Minecraft server. Great.
I love Minecraft.
As do I. That's the only programming I've really got my daughter to do.
Well, like Redstone stuff, or Lua with computer crafts?
So Lua, we did a little bit of Lua, we did a little bit of Python. But the Lua is going to catch on more so because she's really into Roblox, and Roblox has the Lua interface.
Okay.
So.
What do you apply then in Minecraft?
So we got a book.
Okay.
Yeah, and it just basically talks to the API of the Java server in the Pocket. Yeah, the Java server. Yeah. But it just gives you a REST endpoint. So, so we, as far as career goes, that is a consideration, right? So let's talk about the other end of career, entrepreneurship and product, right? You're creating something, and that will speak to what you need to choose as language. If you're creating something and it's a glistening in your eye or whatever, it may not be something you need to think about right away, or it may be exactly the thing that you should be choosing up front. For instance, is it a hardware product? Is it an actual product, or is it a service? Right? Clearly, that will have very deterministic choices. You can do a lot of prototyping though, and I'd say hardware or software, you should have come to choosing a actual software engineering direction or language or all of those hard choices after the product idea has matured. Right? So first steps, you're doing a service, get a WordPress site, put a button on that says like $1,000 and like count how many clicks you get, bring that to an investor, right? Do the Kickstarter type method before you actually choose hard engineering. And I'd say that's true for most actual hardware products. Do a prototype with a Raspberry Pi or a Arduino and a few other things, and hack together the software to produce the behavior you want, right? But probably that's not going to be the thing that you're going to choose for, like, oh, we're staffing up to 200 engineers, or even 10, or 5, or even 3. As soon as you start hiring someone along that lines, that's what product people want to know. I made a choice, well, how does that impact everything else that goes on, right? And that's cost, either for licensing of, say, I don't know, Oracle still does work, right? Right?
Have you Oracle?
Yeah.
The lawyer company?
Yeah, the one that like has the icon of like the trash can where all the other companies went in.
That's Yahoo, right?
Right? Is that
Yahoo or Oracle?
Oracle? Yeah. They'll eventually buy Yahoo. Yeah. Or there might be a licensing capacity to it. It might not be. You might even have something to the effect of you want to do something in Java, and therefore you really should be licensing all of the IntelliJ products, right? Just because it makes it easier for your life. You'll have some licensing costs there. You also have developer costs, which if you are somehow happy with starting with a junior developer, seems like you can get a bargain these days, right? Or should be able to. But no one wants that to start.
If you do a project in Java, you're basically stuck with quote-unquote old people who have...
I don't know, are they still teaching it in college?
I think
They are, yeah.
Yeah, so you might get a completely green, untested person. But they'll be young.
Maybe.
And there's nothing wrong with choosing an old Java person.
But they, like, in the beginning of a company, like all people in general, like, your priority shifts, and like, I actually want to be paid properly, and I have a mortgage now, and I have children now, and so there's a difference between that and
Yes, your old person will be satisfied with more, satisfied with more.
Yes.
So
because
is
they
this more from the point of view of an entrepreneur who's not going to learn the language, but is going to choose the people who are working
So, and that's kind of what I'm saying as far as learning the language and whatnot. You may just want to learn enough hackery to cobble some things together to produce the workflow and whatnot good enough for MVPs type stuff, right?
Okay.
It's definitely going to be hard to evaluate what you're getting for your money if you don't speak the language.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that is true. But and that speaks to the first person that you hire, right? And that's why like a lot of people will hire like someone who is tested, but you know wants to actually like become a CEO or something of that nature, or has done CEO work and passively believes in the product, or is your uncle. I don't know. Like there's a lot of reasons there. But I'd say like if you're gonna hire a senior person, you have to be careful to know that that person is plugged into a wider community and a wider set of options than most old dogs' tricks are in a bag of.
So, how about microservices though? If you start out with it, like microservices. Normally people say like, oh, you only do microservices when you're big because then you have the resources to do the monitoring properly and whatever.
I've started a lot of projects and a lot of services with microservice style growth.
Yeah, if you do that, then you're not as tied to particular technology.
I don't think that
Like
you will need to be actively avoiding being tied to any of those dependencies early on anyway. I don't think that you should like go all in. And even if you go all in on your MVP and got your first funding on something, how many services have completely shifted or shifted in parts? Like Twitter with Ruby and Scala, or there's a lot of considerations.
let's also see a bunch of projects that just have their MVP still running.
Yeah, well, that's the business side of it. Let's not.
It's making money now. Why get rid of it?
I see what you're saying. Yeah. Well, that's a different vision, though, right? Yeah. So, like most people, especially if you're looking at like Silicon Valley growth patterns, you're all about the aggressive blitzkrieg of growth patterns where you just get as big as possible as soon as possible. And to do that, you're going to pour fuel into the engineering side as well as product side. So I would say that most people's MVP, if they have that growth, right, is going to change to somewhat. You guys have, right?
We definitely have putting fuel on the ever-growing MVP.
Sure.
That is still the main the biggest application part of the application out there. But we have all the stuff around it. But
it's not running like WordPress or any like completely.
No, we did when that's true. That's before my time. But it's like they switched from WordPress to or PHP to Ruby.
Yep. So that's a thing that's a constant for a lot of people. So I'd say that if you're learning, learn with the idea that you want to learn something and actively apply it. If you're learning so that you're getting your business off the ground, there might be an easier way, right? And that's the point. Try to find good people to encourage to be senior members of a very early stage product. Make sure that you have the money to give that person, to give them some stability so that they can build a team. And even if that's your first team of 9, right? That's a huge achievement and you need somebody to guide you through that, right? Cool. So, what else with product and entrepreneur? So say you're that CEO. Just got hired from X company who's been running off of a WordPress, or hell, a Facebook ad to get you 2 years of salary and a bunch of stock options and enough things to basically make this happen or not, or at least prove the theory within that 2-year period. How do you choose that? How do you choose what do you do next? What do you go after? What community are you looking at? What language are you looking at? And what are your considerations you're going to have? What type of what will it cost me to license or grab a developer, right? And this means like cost in general. So I'm not talking about just salary. I'm talking about salary and availability. How easy is it to find a competent current Pascal developer?
Not a current one, but I know.
You know a Pascal developer?
He doesn't do it anymore, obviously.
Okay, alright.
But
That's
he's as up to date with it as you can be on Pascal.
I mean, like Pascal, as far as the last build that I saw, and Bruce still had a dependency on Fortran, which was weird.
Wait, Pascal?
Yeah. At least part of the core engine to build it somehow. So what will the cost be in sourcing that person? Right, you have to consider as well, because I don't know a startup who hasn't outsourced and like committed a good amount of resources on a recruitment effort.
Hello.
Yeah.
Well, you're internal, right?
Yeah.
But you still use other services out there. You have to like engage with like a pro LinkedIn and like a Glassdoor or
Yeah, many
Yeah.
strategies.
yeah. So there's like at least like 5 like software service products you're using, and all sorts of nonsense. So that's a huge amount of cost, right? And that's not just because you chose the language you did, but it could have an impact on it, especially if like that language is I don't know, like say your front end was
Something that went away. What was it?
yeah, or something that like is still sort of active.
Ember.js.
What's that?
Ember.js.
Ember.js.
Ember.
That's exactly what I was thinking of.
Yes, that one.
You
not-
totally
didn't
focused.
catch on,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah, I know. I've gotten like 2 calls within the past year about Ember.js. So it's still being
Still,
in
yeah.
the wild, and I really respect the author.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
And do you pick something that's pretty stable, or do you pick something that is cutting edge? Like, what are the sort of pluses and minuses of that, you know?
So let's talk about that. I would say probably the thing that's being used most that is cutting edge is like Go or Elixir, right? But they still have like very vibrant communities. They have basically all of the libraries you would want. There's a lot of support for those libraries. All of the core stuff has like very active contributions. They're all open. So I'd say that's a definite consideration. Now, to me, what I do with most things is I incorporate cutting edge things in utility programs, right? Like I've got a bunch of like Rust, like engine type interfaces that I did in Go, right? More as a learning exercise than anything else. And I think that's probably the first place you go with that type of stuff. But yeah, if you're deciding, I don't see why not.
So who's been in this situation and didn't just go for whatever they
New?
comfortable new and whatever their friends knew? Like every startup I've been is just like, oh, like I want to start this company and I'm going to start with these friends and we all know this in common, so that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, I've come into a lot of places that have started with an initial code base or had gone in a direction that I thought was viable, right? And I continued working with that that service. Or there's like I've had clients like MLB who refuse to do anything outside of the JVM, right? So that definitely changes your constraints, but those are constraints, right? There weren't choices. And I have my first Ruby projects were, and I was using MERB, right? And not
I
Rails.
was still one of those.
Yeah, one of those. Yeah, one of the people that made Rails 3 better. Yeah, that's right. I'd love for you to use microservices. Yeah.
The last time I worked on Rails itself was before I went to Rails 3. So that's
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm
No,
more than the other side.
yeah. Oh, you're doing.
No, I don't do any open source work at the moment. It's
Okay. Right. That makes sense. So, what's that saying? I got off track.
I think we finished talking about it, but the cutting edge versus a stable language.
Yeah,
We're
so
choosing for a group, but yeah.
stable is different than cutting edge. But go ahead.
Yeah.
Isn't there something about like if your code has to be compiled, it's going to take longer to ship?
So that can be the case, but there's a lot of instances where you would want a compiled language. Go is technically a compiled language, and it's very quick and easy to deploy. Java is a compiled language, done in machine code, but that uses a just-in-time compiler, which most everything has now. I'd say compilation is more of an issue in the past, but if you're going to be doing anything that's like low-level machine, you're going to want to have the speed of something that's closer to the machine, and therefore it's probably either a compiled language or like EEPROM in memory. So that's like your C, C++, Java at times. Go, yeah. I haven't seen Go applied to a lot of like hardware solutions.
My previous job was in the hardware shop, and we did our prototyping in Ruby, and like with a Raspberry Pi and just running Ruby on it.
Sure, yeah. Super inefficient.
Yes, exactly. I was more on the services side.
Sure, yeah.
But so for me it was ideal.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of times like just Python or Ruby on a Raspberry Pi. It's a wonderful place to be.
We were making like a mobile hotspot, and there was a lot of that OS that is very proprietary and with very expensive licenses from like the big chip manufacturers that we couldn't afford, so only our manufacturer could afford. So the ability of Go to just ship a binary that is compiled for that environment was
huge.
Was very important.
And that gives you a lot more efficiency on the runtime. And having it compiled. But to tell you the truth, like everything's so fast right now, it hardly matters.
Well, until you have like a device that you need to carry around. It runs on battery power.
And that's a fantastic example of that. Like, let's just have a playground to work in to kind of get our ideas straight, get what we want as far as a deliverable, and then when it comes down, we're going to ship language, but that's going to be straight production, and just be delivering product at that point. So that cost becomes deferred.
Talking about how long it takes to deploy something. Deploying something on hardware and firmware level, that takes a while.
I mean, like, even if you're talking about, like, I've installed, like, continuous integration and continuous deployment on every, like, product I've had in the past, like, 3 years. But even then, we say it's continuous integration and continuous deployment, right? But really what that means is a bunch of microservices or something have to bubble up some code to a multi-stage set of engines that test the hell out of your code, and eventually, after several cycles of re-pushing things up, you'll get to a place where integration tests will pass, and yes, you'll deploy to a tested place, and then an integration place, and then production. So even then, you're going to have at least let's say a 2-week cycle for most deployment, right? For any feature to service, and that's delivering just for websites or APIs. Then you have like iOS deployment, right? Not only do you have like an Android, right? Or Google Play or whatever. Then you have that, plus you have all of these deployment options as far as what the person who has this product already has to do. Do they have to do the upgrade right now? Right? Is this a critical update to the product? Or is it just the next version? Or is it just an additional feature or a bug fix that they can ignore for 6 months? Right? And that's a huge additional set of deployment stuff. Yeah, sending someone a disk or a embedded chip way easier. Definitely. And then at least you don't have to live with it until the next chip. No, I don't know. Deployment's hard, and it does take a while. I'd say that there's no good language for it.
To deploy?
Yeah.
How about Erlang-based languages with the hot deployment of stuff?
Oh yeah. Actually, that's cool. And have you done that with Elixir yet?
No, of course not.
Yeah.
No, that's way too hard.
Yeah. Really?
I also like I have just not gotten there. Like
I assumed that Jose would make that super easy, like he makes everything.
Google has the hot soup
Oh, do they?
of being VM stuff.
Oh, do they? Okay.
So but I haven't tried it yet.
I mean, supposedly we've had hot deploys for a long time. Even with Capistrano.
That's actually the best deployment tool I've had because it's so fast.
Yeah, it's good fast.
But
But it's just using SSH. It's just using SSH.
I can program my terminal and like screen and tmux to deploy on multiple servers at once and have a whole bunch of symlinks.
And if you like that service because of its speed, there's like a ton of others that are forks or just like completely Capistrano without all of the BS or the cruft that it's built up over like the 20 years it's been in a project. It's good shit. But yeah, Elixir is good for deployment. I'm gonna turn this off. So what else? For specialization, is there language to have? Like you mentioned Erlang, right? Erlang was developed by Ericsson. And Ericsson is a
Yeah,
That
it's
is
fun.
still?
They don't know no consumer products anymore, but
Okay.
they make all they are. I
They're
think
like
still,
they're like Novell in like 1983.
yes.
Or
Like Nokia.
Nokia. Yeah. Absolutely.
Same country.
Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, that's a language that was designed completely thinking only of networks and thinking of that type of work, which is very useful but was very specialized. There's a lot of languages like that. It used to be that no one was interested in the programming language R except for statisticians, mathematicians, and maybe some elementary data science that was being done.
Still the case though.
I think it's like now that data science is like embedded in every startup.
Yeah.
Data science is bigger, but like it's still you still use it for only.
Yeah. So another specialty language, right? There's several of those, but generally when you come up with a startup or you're learning to learn something, it is not. You don't go to those niches first.
Right.
Unless I guess that's your product.
Can be, yeah. Yeah, and those are really interesting products. All right.
Yeah.
A lot of like investment funds and traders use R, right?
So yeah, that would make sense. Actually, most investors and hedge funds and whatnot that I've seen basically use Excel. And if they're really sophisticated, they've hired a bunch of developers to, behind the cells of Excel, basically do additional programming in Python and R and Ruby, which is insane. It's madness. It's like if you've ever thought of anything for information display or information theory or anything like that, having 12 monitors with like 12 full-blown Excel sheets, all with each cell having a different color representing something and a change in context and 1,000 different macros, it's not a way to live.
So they're using Excel as the interface?
Yeah. It happens a lot because you have a lot of people who that's what they know. That's how they built like interfaces to display data for themselves, right? So even when they're like, there's a lot of, I've had tons of contracts and tons of customers who most of which have been unsuccessful, or the companies I've been with have been unsuccessful in convincing them that Excel is not a good metaphor for the data that they want. And unless you really show them another way, because they're comfortable with it. A lot of people are comfortable with Excel.
I got a roommate who was into financial Excel, and
Yeah.
I was with a terminal.
Yeah, but like one of the things that was really interesting to me is showing, because I'm fairly open with my work, right? I don't hunch over and like guard my secrets or anything. So like when like I work with hedge funds and whatnot, a lot of hedge fund people, sellers and whatnot, would see what I could do with Ruby very quickly with the similar data. And they would ask me to teach them or where they could go, because it's way faster to like cobble up a whole bunch of data structures even in terminal, right? Terminal interface with Ruby, like a REPL or Python for that matter. And I think that's our job as programmers, is to show people that only exist in Excel that there's a better way, and take them there.
I mean, that was kind of part of the second part of the listing of what we would talk about, is how do you convince maybe your teammates or other people like to say, hey, this you've been doing it in this language, but there's this other way of doing it. How do you go about showing it, or
I wouldn't
getting them to
try
adopt
to convince anyone of anything in that respect. What I do is you don't generally have to convince developers to like look at something new. You might have to convince them not to shit on it immediately.
Okay. Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
I'd say I am all about fostering a good environment of debate and openness and whatnot, and that makes things a lot easier when you're making any decisions in programming, right? So if it comes to, I want everyone to have their work shown and everything exposed, and I'd like to do that to convince people of something being better by showing them and not telling them, right? So have you seen this, Bob? This is great. Maybe we should consider some of this for Project X, which is always called Project X, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So show, don't tell.
And that initial buy-in, you just sort of build the trust first, and then and then say, hey, give me a day, give me 2 days. If it's like a workplace thing.
This I think this talk is targeted to if you're looking to learn or looking to take on or choose a new language for a product, right?
Yeah.
I guess it depends, like, who are you trying to convince? Are you trying to convince an owner of someone with money? They generally, most people with money, if they have any confidence in you as an engineer, you can choose whatever the hell you want. And they are trusting you to think of all of the considerations that I just laid out. Whether there's a pool of people that's available for the growth, or whether it's going to be a cheap language to learn. They're basically going to allow all of those decisions.
Although I have pitched clients before who debated me on Ruby as the best language, and so they went with some other consulting company. So
what was the consideration?
It was like 3 years ago. So it was.
What did they choose?
I think they chose like something node based.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. Like Angular at the time or something like that.
Sweet. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, because who isn't looking to move off of their Angular instructor right now? No, people are going to do that. Entrepreneurs are going to try to do their own research, and they're going to type in what is the best language to do X, right? And they're going to get a ton of Stack Overflow hits. They're going to click on that one from like 2007 that says like Node is the new hotness, forget Ruby, and they're not going to look at the date. And they're going to make a decision, or at least want to raise it, and if they didn't like your answer, they would go with the guy who said he knew Node, and said that Ruby people were all done. Yeah. But that's not a good argument. Use rhetoric.
Yeah.
Well, it's always going to be the argument. Like I think inertia is a big reason.
It is, but that's
it's not a good argument, but it is still a thing.
And
it's going to be
there's a reason for that, because there is validity to it, and go to the underlying reasons of that validity. Groundswell builds community. Community allows for a lot of eyes on bugs, allows a lot of contributions that are happening, right? And then you have the other side of that, where Python people will say like Ruby gets it wrong because they allow everyone to just commit to very critical libraries.
But it also causes people to stay with Python 2 for way too long, or or any other
or Perl.
But Ruby 1.8.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is that's a consideration too. I filed that under support, right? How fast is everything moving? Does your team, can they adapt? I wouldn't want to hire anyone in JavaScript who isn't used to having like 4 builds running at once with varying levels of library upgrades, right? Because that stuff breaks all the time. And there's tons of great tools now to mitigate a lot of it for JavaScript, right? And built into Node now as well. You don't even need, like npm does everything Webpack used to, and a bunch more. So you need to be on top of things, whether you're doing Ruby or JavaScript. They both move very quick, right? Especially in Rails. Python less so. Go seems like along the same stretch as Python as far as like.
I think Ruby has slowed down quite a bit.
Well, maybe it's slowed down in like the Node core. No, it hasn't. It's all going.
It's still.
It's all very fast. There may be pockets that haven't gained some maturity.
I mostly do Sinatra or stuff like that, and that's pretty stable.
Yeah, that's definitely got a lot of stability.
I'm an old grumpy man.
It's alright. I've been doing nothing but Google Functions for the past 2 months.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it's alright.
So, if you were to come to me and say I've got this new function written, this new service written in Haskell or something, I would give you a hard time.
Would you?
Yeah, I would give that.
There's a bunch of companies in New York that are running Haskell.
I would want to know everything about that thing you said, but to take it on and take it into production, I would give you a hard time.
Yeah.
Just because it's an unknown factor.
It's unknown to you. So what would you do to research if it's a good idea, or would you just assume that your level of understanding of the Haskell community and all of that is sufficient right now?
So I.
Loaded question.
What have you heard or what do you know about Haskell?
I know
It's
Haskell
unreadable.
only from legend. It's a very.
That's fair.
It's
Dude, when I saw Haskell in the wild, it was pretty impressive. I took pictures.
It's consider any different than any other compiled language in terms of deploying.
Yeah.
I would be super impressed by having that, but I also do the support stuff and the sysops parts, and I need to be able to debug it and things go wrong and understand its performance.
Haskell's really interesting because it's incredibly difficult to read. But you generally don't need to, because once you write it, it's pretty hard to improve on because of the nature of it.
No, I believe that. It's like
And it
in
makes me-
Haskell's case, I know that it's amazing.
Yeah, no, but
But
it
like
makes
if
me
it was
uncomfortable.
PHP, then I would give you a hard time on
Oh.
both fronts. Like A, it's
Yeah. No, I've
something you
seen-
don't have, and B,
I've
it's
seen
bad.
good PHP in books, but nowhere else. Which is weird.
I've heard that it's used in cryptography right now.
PHP?
PHP?
Or Haskell.
Oh,
Yeah. It's also been used for a long time to generate the PHP for Facebook.
What the hip hop stuff?
No, I'm not sure, but it generates a good chunk of active PHP inside of Facebook services, which I thought was interesting. Right? And it seems like that's a very complex problem to have to do, generating language on the fly.
Is Facebook an example of like you dig yourself in too much with a single language?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, you have to turn to Haskell to come up with the templating generation that you need. Probably. But still, an amazing use of Haskell and an impressive case there. And at that point, really, once you get to the size of Facebook or the size ranking, then a lot of these problems are done, right? Like, yes, hire one person for every language and seed them around your company doing something you may never know when you need them.
There's a book called Introduction to Web Technologies. It's like 100 pages, and it goes
Into a what?
web technologies.
Okay.
And at the end, there's a really brief synopsis of a few companies and all the languages that they primarily use.
Oh, really? Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, a lot of the bigger ones, I mean.
Yeah.
It could be
Is it recent?
That's what I was going to say. It could be somewhat outdated at this point, but like,
Well, I know that Google uses a lot of Java still.
Java and
Python David moved to doing a lot with.
Go.
And they're doing some Node now too. Or at least they have a lot of Node support. Especially for like functions and whatnot. A lot of the Lambda type services. Yeah, it's important to track that for sure. So you never know when you want to give up and run for Google. Yeah.
There's this one financial company in New York that uses a camel for everything. Jane Street.
Bank in America?
No, Jane Street.
Oh, really?
They.
What?
I stayed in Airbnb with a bunch of them.
I love OCaml. OCaml's so
Yeah, no,
weird.
it's great, but they're weirdly into it.
Yeah.
And
OCaml is
like,
kind of like
you can-
Haskell in a lot of ways.
Yeah, but you cannot get developers for that.
No.
stuff. Like you.
But that's the interesting thing is too.
apparently, yeah.
I don't know. Well, there's a lot of companies that will just train you up. They're like, oh, you know enough like Java, and we put you through the training. So now you're going to be hired here and run this new language, all that.
Yeah,
And I respect that a lot. That's
it's
great.
also a sign, like if you know Haskell, you're probably a good developer. So hey, let's build everything in Haskell and have that as a filter.
Well, it's different, right? Because like I wouldn't hire someone who's only programmed Haskell to do like Python or Ruby. They'd be confused as all hell.
No, but like if you make your project in Haskell, that means if your product is more on the scientific side anyway,
Yeah.
then you would have a good filter of people coming in.
And OCaml and Haskell are a good match.
Yeah.
For sure. Cool. Any other questions? Any thoughts?
No, we were going. We've been talking a lot choosing languages.
Yep.
Maybe because aside from choosing frameworks, in particular, JavaScript's come up a lot, and choosing a framework in JavaScript is just as important as you saying you want to use JavaScript.
Is it important? Is it just as important? I'm gonna challenge that. I'm gonna say hire someone who knows vanilla JavaScript.
Or ES6 or
At least
7. I've lost count.
ES6 is
Yeah.
pretty standard now, so I would say like at least they should know ES6.
Is it with or without classes?
So ES6 did not have the classes. I think TypeScript and the next version introduces them. But I mean, like that's the thing with JavaScript too. Is like you can always You can always fold in the sugar, right? And everyone does.
So you mentioned .NET in the beginning in your introduction, and we haven't talked about the Microsoft side at all. Is that
We haven't, and here's my problem. I used to like have a VM, like just occasionally like pop it open and like look at Windows and like confirm my tutorial for installing something or whatever. But I've stopped doing that and I don't care anymore.
But F#?
I know, I get it.
Nice.
No, I get it. And
There's definitely lots of companies.
Microsoft paid for most of the development of Haskell, and F# is the reward of that, for sure. I get it, and I should know it. This is me confessing that I'm dropping the ball. Do you know any Microsoft Windows work? Do you do any?
I don't do any. That's the easy question. I do.
So you're the only person in this room who's using a Microsoft Windows?
I think for web application, ASP domain, MVC,
Sure.
develop a web application. I think in the Middle West state, many small company
Yeah.
will choose this one, so
Yeah.
you can have the Microsoft support. But in the like a startup or in a big company,
The company I'm working for right now does a lot of Microsoft support. But you know, I'm doing a data pipeline, and they shipped me an apple. So, but yeah, I get that. And there's definitely support. I feel bad for not knowing
Should you?
I don't know.
Should I?
Should you do that?
Well, maybe it's just the market you're in, though. I mean,
was-
the New York market is
Well, the
New York
last time I
market
fired
different.
up a Windows box was on a Raspberry Pi, Windows 10. So I feel like the fact that I can do that makes me feel like I should feel bad about it.
Have you seen all the ads inside the paid OS?
Yeah, it's kind of where you are.
No, I only have the
Like,
developer's
the
version.
version law does stuff.
The thing, like, I often go to like code retreats and stuff like that, and always the Microsoft developers are like, oh, I can't wait until Microsoft decides in its internal wisdom to support feature blah and feature this. Like they're always waiting, and it's the same with Swift. I feel
Really?
they're always waiting for like the corporate
Swift
overlords.
is kind of open.
But nobody does. Like we're open source, but you're not allowed to touch it.
Yeah,
You're
it's
not
like Darwin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so I think like if it's Ruby, you know, you're more open. If it's actually
Yeah, but again, like if you are comfortable with Windows in any capacity, learning Ruby is far harder, right? I'd say like learning anything without an IDE pretty much is hard.
That's the moment I switched to Linux.
Well, yeah, I cut my teeth on Linux, like which made it easier to use OS X
Yeah.
than it is using Windows. So at least I have all of those tools.
That's true.